future, here we are.
Wait, where's Pumpkin? Pumpkin!
Believe it or not, I've wanted to make a video centered around Pumpkin from Steven Universe for a long while, and I figured that now is the perfect time to do so. Yes, we're transitioning from flexible fan favorites to gargantuan game changers to fruit. But Pumpkin is way more than just your typical piece of produce. In fact, fans love her so much that a certain reveal from the Crooniverse brought most of the fandom to tears.
Pumpkins don't last forever.
What? Pumpkins don't last forever? Oh no, that 100% confirms it then! Pumpkin is dead! The lovable little orange lump is moved on! Why, creators? Why? You're not the Crooniverse anymore! You're the Crooniverse! Except if you actually watch to the end of the clip, you'll hear this. The audio from the clip is really hard to hear, but it sounds like he said, it's okay, Pumpkin's okay. So which is it then? Is she alive? Is she dead? Is she going to die? Was that Pumpkins don't last forever bit just a joke, or will it have actual plot significance later? Listen, Crooniverse, you can tease us with plot reveals, you can make us wait on long hiatuses, but you do not, I repeat, you do not make cruel jokes about precious pumpkin puppy baby must protect. That is just not done. In all seriousness though, whether Pumpkin is dead or alive, there are some really interesting story beats and emotional moments that can be derived from her in Steven Universe future. In fact, a few of my fellow SU analysts have covered some pretty interesting ones already. But like usual, I enjoy thinking outside the box and coming up with my own ideas. It's possible that the status of Pumpkin's life will affect way more than just the feelings of the characters. It may even play a pivotal role in the major conflict of this series. So let's dig deeper into Pumpkin's possibilities and see what's inside. Not literally. Oh, jeez. Anyway, let's discuss the possible passing of Pumpkin. First, let's talk about Pumpkin as a character in Steven Universe, because there's actually way more to her than just a cute face and huggable size. In Gem Harvest, which is where Pumpkin first appears, we see that Peridot has managed to adapt her designated purpose, growing gems in the kindergarten, into something more in tune with her new casual life on Earth, that being growing crops. And it does make sense, there are some distinct similarities. You gotta place the dormant beings far apart from each other so they have room to grow, you gotta provide nutrients so they're able to develop, wait a little while, and then poof, out pops a new living thing. However, there is one major difference between growing gems and growing crops. When you grow crops, they don't exactly walk or talk or, do things that gems do. You can't expect an ear of corn to trample enemies or promote galactic domination. It can promote healthy snacking habits though. But anyway, Peridot admits that she actually misses the pitter-patter of gem soldier feet. She misses the familiar feeling of always having other gems around her at all times, which is a stark difference to the quiet country life she lives now. There's clearly a piece of her still missing that prevents Peridot from truly being comfortable in her new lifestyle. So Steven decides to lend her a hand and plants a seed covered in his spit, giving birth to our favorite Pumpkin. And this little fruit baby is the missing piece she needed. The final plank in the bridge that connects the instilled desires and nostalgia of her old life with the calm, relaxed new direction of her current life. She's used to creating sentient life to serve a higher power. It was her small purpose in the big machine that was the Diamond Authority. But now, cradled in her arms is sentient life that she helped create of her own free will. It tickles the nostalgic feeling she has of her old existence, but reshapes them into something new. A life form that can feel and run and play and be whatever it wants to be. Just like her. Something that is loyal to Peridot not because it was designed to be, but just because it wants to be. A constant reminder that any creature of any kind can make a life on Earth. Even if Steven is the one who planted the seed, she cleared the land, she tilled the soil, she bought the seeds, and over the years, she provided the love. Steven just added that one element that she wasn't able to, and it made for an adorable bond that actually runs way deeper than your typical human and dog relationship. Pumpkin sadly doesn't appear in a lot of episodes, but during the few times she does show up, they take complete advantage of her presence. In Raising the Barn, I doubt that Peridot would have been able to reveal her true feelings about leaving Earth if not for Pumpkin's primitive behavior. Pumpkin isn't concerned about emotionally fragile topics or handling things delicately. She's a dog. When she sees something that makes her uncomfortable, she's gonna run away from it. And this episode would not have played out as perfectly as it did if Peridot didn't take that time away to reflect on the situation. Any show can make an episode about a lost pet, but Pumpkin's more simplistic mindset actually gave Peridot time to think over her approach to this problem.
Oh, who's a good girl? Who gave her master time to work through her emotional trauma? You did, yeah, you did.
As for Lapis, we don't get too many interactions between her and Pumpkin, but I still do think that Pumpkin was a big help when it came to Lapis becoming more comfortable in her new life. She's pretty much been through nothing but trauma for most of her lifetime. Living through war, getting trapped in a mirror, restraining a monster through fusion, constantly worrying about what Homeworld might do to her, it's a miserable existence to live life in fear and sadness. And I think having a creature like Pumpkin around, a piece of earth who showers her owners with love on a daily basis, is a really great way to heal after such a long string of painful events. Heck, emotional support animals exist for a reason, and even though we haven't gotten to see it, I guarantee that Pumpkin was really helping Lapis to enjoy her new life on Earth. In fact, I'll bet when Perry and Lapis were poofed during Reunited, Pumpkin stood guard over her mamas until they came back. I know this is just fan art, but I really wish this was canon. Imagine an episode like that scene from WALL-E, where Pumpkin tries to bring the two of them back because she doesn't understand what's going on. I would watch the heck out of that. So yeah, I obviously hold Pumpkin in a really high regard, but with Future quickly approaching, what exactly can we expect from her when it comes to story? Well, first things first, we have to see just how fragile Pumpkin actually is. And if we compare Pumpkin to her closest ancestors, the Watermelon Stevens, we get some possible answers. While the Watermelon Stevens are definitely more durable than your average piece of food, they still do possess many attributes of a normal watermelon. They can crack if something hits them with enough force, they can rot and fall apart if they stay out in the sun too long, and they can also just go bad after a while, leaving behind seeds which can grow new generations. Technically, if Pumpkin was brought to life by the same spit, we can assume that many of these attributes also apply to her as well. So this would mean that Pumpkin would only last about 8 to 12 weeks based on normal Pumpkin logic, right? Well, not exactly. We've also seen that Steven's spit is capable of healing all kinds of injuries for both inorganic and organic beings. Even the life-sucking power of Spinel's biopoison wasn't enough to keep Steven from restarting the circle of life. So if Steven's saliva can fix injuries of organic beings and replenish the life force of plants that have been sucked dry, it's not a stretch to assume that it could also help keep Pumpkin in one piece, and even let her retain her freshness for a long time. So yeah, it's definitely possible for Pumpkin to have lived this long, but which outcome for Pumpkin would make for better story ideas? Alive or dead? And would these outcomes have possible effects on other things that were revealed about SU Future? Perhaps Senor Cactus Tumor? Well, you know how much I love writing my stories, so let's try and craft a potential tale for both outcomes and see what we come up with. Also, for both versions, I'm going to try and use the title and description for Prickly Pear, one of the revealed episode names a while back, since I think that's when Cactus Steven is likely to show up. Alright, here we go. So Steven visits Peridot, Lapis, and Pumpkin after a long day of helping out with little homeschool. Pumpkin happily greets him, and Steven spits on both his hands to give her a little rub down. This would establish how Pumpkin was able to survive for this long, thanks to Steven's healing spit. He shows Peridot that he bought a bunch of different seeds at the plant store, and would like to do a little farming with her. He's been feeling very stressed and angry after certain incidents with Pink Steven, as shown in that one trailer, and he wants to find a way to relax and wind down. Heck, you can even hint at that one time that they grew sunflowers in Back to the Kindergarten, and say that Steven wants to learn to grow other plants too. Peridot is obviously thrilled to teach farming again, and takes Steven to an empty patch of land. They spend the entire day planting various crops and flowers until they get to the last packet of seeds, cacti. Peridot says that cacti likely won't grow in farmland and gives him a pot full of potting soil instead, a little souvenir to take home. So Steven plants a cactus seed in the pot and gives Pumpkin one last rub down before he leaves for the day. Pumpkin shakes off the excess spit like a dog trying to dry itself, and it gets all over Steven and his plant. Foreshadowing! Steven puts the cactus pot on his windowsill and goes to bed, but the next morning, what he wakes up to is a towering demonic Cactus Steven with multiple heads. Now before you ask questions, consider this. We don't exactly know the technicals of how Steven's plant growing powers work. He's only used it 2 major times as far as I remember, the Watermelon Stevens and Pumpkin, and both times we wound up with plants that have completely different personalities. My assumption on this whole thing is that when Steven grows a living plant, his emotions and/or conscious mental state is the thing that affects what will come out. For example, he made the Watermelon Stevens by 100% accident, and when they came out, they were essentially just blank slate bodyguards who didn't really have ulterior motives or desires until later in the series. They came out that way because Steven didn't really have anything in mind for them. They were accidental. Then if we look at Pumpkin, we see that Steven had a clear mental state and an idea in mind for what he wanted to grow. He wanted to make a friend for Peridot and Lapis, and after he planted the seed, they got the best friend that any human or gem could ever ask for, a puppy! As shown in the trailers for this series, it seems that Steven is going to be suppressing a lot of anger and angst which he chooses to ignore instead of addressing. So when he plants the cactus seed and Pumpkin accidentally shakes some spit onto it, that spit would probably be reflective of his mental state and feelings when he used it. So instead of growing a cute, lovable creature or a blank Steven slate, it would grow a gigantic, angry, hulking monster that just wants to destroy everything. You can even say that the multiple Steven heads are the multiple emotions that his head is wrestling with at the moment. So the gems are obviously called upon to take care of this problem. They have a nice little fight scene against the cactus creature, they tear it to shreds, and then at the end, Steven is finally forced to face facts. Concealing his anger and anxiety is only going to cause harm to himself and others. So after fighting off a gigantic cactus monster, he decides to fight off his inner monsters by talking about his problems with his family. No holds barred. It seems like things are gonna be okay for Steven and company, until Jasper, or one of her helpers, decides to sneak into Little Homeworld after all is said and done and snatch a souvenir. They would take as many of the seeds from Cactus Steven as they can, all of which still have Steven's DNA on it and could potentially grow new Cactus Stevens. Remember how I said that the Watermelon Stevens have likely lived on for many generations by planting the seeds of dead members, further enforced by this Crooniverse tweet? Well, I think the same could be done with the seeds from Cactus Steven, meaning Jasper and company might be capable of growing an entire army of these things, making their odds of winning all the more likely. Alright, let's get to the sad possibility. If Pumpkin really has to die, I would want it to go down like this. So it starts very recently after Pumpkin's passing, with the Crystal Gems and Steven consoling Lapis and especially Peridot about the recent events. This would be the ideal time for Pearl, Amethyst, and Garnet to calm them down by drawing a parallel between Pumpkin's passing and Rose's passing. They could explain how confused and lost they were without their leader and best friend, how they didn't understand the concept of death, how everything they knew and loved was just taken away immediately. But sadly, this doesn't make Peridot feel any better, because as we've seen, she's already had everything she loved taken away when Lapis took the barn into space. She's been lost, confused, and depressed once upon a time. And aside from her friends supporting her, the one constant she always had was Pumpkin. Pumpkin was with her pretty much every day of her old life, loving her, greeting her, always being around. Even when Lapis went off the grid, she still had Pumpkin by her side. Now imagine that one constant not just being gone, but gone forever. I imagine that would be an emotional punch that's even more painful than when Lapis left, and a small conversation just wouldn't be enough to fix things. So despite their best efforts, Peridot says that she just wants to be alone, so everyone does as she asks. But Steven does give the two of them a gift, a box full of seeds from the original Pumpkin. If they ever wanted a new Pumpkin running around, they could just call on him and he'll gladly plant it for them. Peridot clearly doesn't even want to think of a new Pumpkin at the moment, so they just put the seeds in a box on their shelf and leave it there. Days go by and they're still really upset. Steven tries to cheer them up with regular visits, but the pair are still sad and the box of seeds is still on the shelf. He notices that they're not even harvesting their crops anymore, so he figures he'd do them a favor. It's a big harvest and he knows it'll take forever to do it on his own, so he takes advantage of a new hobby he's been interested in after leaving new home school: plants. He decides to make a new Watermelon Steven-esque helper to aid him with the harvest, but he needs a plant that is very durable, long-lasting, and can survive under the heat of the sun and heavy workloads, so he ends up going with a Cactus Steven. The two of them harvest most of the crops and bring them over to Lapidot before they leave. Steven takes the cactus home and says that they'll do the rest tomorrow, but once he falls asleep, one of Jasper's associates, probably the Aquamarine Ruby Fusion, kidnaps the Cactus Steven and takes it to Jasper. Jasper immediately dissects the Cactus Steven and takes out the seeds to study them, hoping that they could be useful in their upcoming attack or even learning more about Steven. Then everyone wakes up the next morning to see exactly what Jasper and company have created. A gigantic, freaky Cactus Steven abomination, probably made by splicing multiple seeds together like those gem shard fusions we saw earlier in the series. Like last time, everyone fights it off in a big epic battle scene, but in this version, Peridot and Lapis's house, wherever they happen to be living, ends up getting destroyed, along with the box of pumpkin seeds that they had left in there. This causes Peridot to frantically search through the rubble in tears in hopes of finding the seeds, but she ends up finding nothing. She realizes that she just lost her one chance to move on from Pumpkin. It was sitting there, a box of possible new beginnings, but she just let it pass her by, and this makes her really upset. Steven comforts her by saying that it's never too late to start again, and then if by some miracle, they do find one remaining seed amongst the wreckage, they all end up planting it together, and what comes out is an adorable, bouncing pumpkin puppy. Come on, we gotta give the story a happy ending. Think of the kitties. But then at the very end, we see that Jasper is working on an entire army of these evil Cactus Stevens for a possible invasion. I can imagine a big sweeping reveal, like the unveiling of all those warships before the Siege of the North from Avatar, adding yet another asset to the eventual destruction of the Crystal Gems. But hey, at least we got a pumpkin puppy. At the end of the day though, personal thoughts, all facts excluded, I don't want Pumpkin to die. I really don't. I always hate seeing pets pass away, especially dogs. You ever read the Odyssey? The saddest part of that book is when Odysseus' dog Argos finally sees his master after so many years. He's sitting there in waste, flies swarming around him, and he uses his last bit of strength to perk up his ears and wag his tail to welcome his master home one last time. We don't deserve dogs, man. We just don't. Man's best friend is an understatement. But as per usual, I'm always open and hyped to see what kinds of stories the Crooniverse will spin for us in every episode. I might smile with joy, I might cry my eyes out, more than likely I'll do both, but in the end, I'm sure that something bright and beautiful will sprout up from all the tiny seeds of ideas that they've shown us so far. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Tell me if you think Pumpkin will play a major role in SU Future, and subscribe for more Steven Universe and cartoon content coming at you. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I hope to see you all real soon.